Hilches Zechiah U'Matanah. Now, we mentioned that the Rambam divides Hilches Mechira and Hilches Zechiah U'Matanah. Even though there would be a mokum to think that Matana is maybe more dema to Mechira than to Zechiah, because by both of them there's a Das Acheres Makna. The difference on by Mechira, the Mekabel is giving something, he's buying it. Mashenkin by Matana is being only given to him. But on the other hand, there's a Das Acheres Makna as opposed to Zechiah, where there's no Das Acheres Makna. And there's taka differences in Allah as a result of that. But nevertheless, Vaistai, Zechiah U'Matanah, both of them, there's no money. There's nothing that the Zechiah is giving for it. He's just being Zechiah. Al Derezer Matana, he's only receiving. Mashenkin Mechira, over there, he's buying something. So Vaistai is that's the chiluk. That's why Mechira is separately and Zechiah U'Matanah go together. Hilchis Zechiah U'Matanah inyan elo halachas leida din zeichem and hefker heich yikna ubamei yikna. The din of how is a person zeichem and hefker heich yikna ubamei yikna. Not sure the chiluk between the words heich yikna ubamei yikna. And then the din noisen matana makabel matana dinam of how you give a matana, how you receive a matana. And ve'eze matana chizeres, ve'eze eine chazares, if the person gave the matana, so when does the chazar or the matana go back, and when doesn't it go back? Ubir kol adinam ha'ele beprokim ha'ele. So in these halachas, there's no new mitzvahs. This halachas is only telling us how a person is zeichem and a hefker, and al derazeh, how a person is seder of nesinas umekabel matana. Perikrish, ha-hefker. A hefker means something that was owned by someone, and he was mafker. He made it into a state of hefker, like we'll learn behemshech. Is kol ha-magzik bezocha. Whoever is magzik in the hefker, he's zoicha. V'chein ha-midbaris v'ha-nehoris v'ha-necholim. Deserts and rivers and streams is kol shebehem. Anything that's found in this midbar or nor and nachal, all of it is hefker. And v'chol ha-kedim bem zocha. Kigein ho-asabim anything that's found in these midbaris or naharis or necholim is all considered hefker. Now the Meister Alter Rebbe in Hilchas Hefker, in his Cheshem Mishpat, in Kuntzes Achron, in his first Kuntzes Achron in Hilchas Hefker, Alter Rebbe discusses the chiluk between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. Alter Rebbe says that this din, that anything that finds itself in the midbaris and the haris and the cholim, that's talking about in Chutz La'aretz. Mashenkin in Eretz Yisrael, where the Eibishter divided Eretz Yisrael to the Eretz Yisrael was divided according to the Shvatim, and therefore when they made a kinyan, even they made a kinyan in the Arim, so that kinyan, the din is that when a person acquires karka, so if he gets it through mechira or through matana, so if you make even if you're buying, let's say 10 karkois, 10 sodas, bas eser ayoris, and you make a kinyan in one of them, like we learned in Hilchas Mechira, so you kaina all 10 sodas. And al derazeh b'matana, if someone's giving you a present, so there's a das acheres makna, and you make a kinyan in one of the sodas, you kaina all the sodas. Masha'inkin, that's only when we're dealing when there's a das acheres makna. Masha'inkin, when there's no das acheres makna, when a person is being gzeich on his own, so there's no mitzias, like we learn also behemshech, to be kaina one thing, through making a ma'aseh kinyan here, you'll be kaina somewhere else. There's no that musik doesn't work unless there's a das acheres makna. So in Eretz Yisrael, where over there was a das acheres makna, the Eibishter gave it to the shvatim. So Memela, when they made a kinyan in the ayoris, so they were Memela killed in the midbar, and Memela everything in the midbar belongs to that shevet. So Memela doesn't go into a gather of hefker. Masha'inkin in Chutz La'aretz, where there was no such a musik, so Memela anything that finds itself in midbaris, naharis, and necholim, all kol shebam hefker. That's what Alter Rebbe writes over there in the Kuntzes Achron to be masber a stira al kol pon. So is noch einmal a hefker kol a magzik beizocha v'chein a midbaris v'anaharis v'anacholim. So the Ram doesn't write that it's dafke in Chutz La'aretz, but that's how the Alter Rebbe is masber v'chein a midbaris v'anaharis v'anacholim kol shebehem hefker. And v'chol ha-kedim bem zocha kigein ho-asabim v'o'etzim v'aperes shel ilon shel yar u'kiyetzim bem, anything that's found in a desert, in a river, or in a stream, all is hefker. That's this din. Now, b'negeh the desert itself, can you make a ma'aseh kinyan on a desert? So l'ma'aseh is, if you make a ma'aseh kinyan on a desert, so if it remains a desert, so there's no musik of a ma'aseh kinyan on a desert. But mashengen, if you're gonna, because there's a musik, the musik of a chazaka is enhancing a karka. That's the musik of a chazaka. So Memela, if you're going to go ahead and take a piece of the desert and separate it from the desert, so then it's not going to become a desert anymore. So Memela, that's why the Rambam talks about making a kinyan in something in the desert, but not actually making a kinyan on the desert itself. Although theoretically you could really cut off a piece of the desert and designate that that's yours, build a wall around it and then create it that it should be yours, so then it would be yours. So Nachmal, if even though the Rambam doesn't speak about the idea of actually being koine the midbar, so the Maisa is if a person would take a part of the midbar and make a Maisa kinyan there and make a fence around it, so he could also be koine, because since the midbar is a mokim of hefker, so memela he would be koine. The point is that if the midbar remains a midbar and it just makes a Maisa chazaka, that wouldn't really be a Maisa chazaka. Maisa chazaka is a thing that's enhancing the land. When a person goes ahead and is no god ruparat, so he's enhancing the land, that would be a Maisa chazaka. So technically, there was not really shaykhs to make a Maisa kinyan on the midbar or on the sea unless you take a portion of it and you designate it for yourself, and then the taka becomes uis, part of the sea. That's how the Even Ozil explains it. Halacha beis. Hatzod dogim min hayam umin hanaharis. A person catches fish from a sea or from an ocean, from a river. Shetzod eifes iminichayis, or he catches birds or different types of chayas. Is hail ve'ein lehem bailim. So all these animals and the fish don't have bailim. Is zocha. Aber bulvad sheli yosud b'tzei chaver. A person is not allowed to go into someone's field in order to trap animals because he's trespassing. You're not allowed to trespass. However, v'im tzotsham, if lepel he went into the field and he trapped an animal there and he caught an animal there, skana. Because the fact that this animal was in the field doesn't make it the owner of the fields. Because lepel it's a chotzer she'enim mishtameres, it's a chotzer she'enim mishtameres, so therefore he's not kena beking a chotzer. Now, however, v'im hoyu hadogim bebibrim shel bailim, or v'chein v'chay v'ev shebebibrim, in other words, they were in an area that actually belonged to the bailim. So aval pishu bibur gadol, even if we're talking about a large area of v'hu mechusar tzeda, so it still has to be trapped. But lepel, since it's an area which belongs to the bailim, and these animals can't get out of this place. In other words, the fish are trapped there, even though they're mitzad hilchus tzeda, they still have to be trapped. Al-that is that the animals have to still be trapped. But as far as kinyan is concerned, it's considered a chotza mishtameres. That's the chiddush over here. That if the dogim were in bibrim shel bailim, or the chay ve'efes were in a bibrim shel bailim, so even though they're mechusat tzeda, so mechusat tzeda mitzad hilchus tzeda. But on the other end, they still consider a chotza mishtameres. Aval pishul bibur gadol v'mechusat tzeda is a reze shel bal habibrim. And therefore, v'atzad mishamar is a gazlan. So when a person catches fish from a sea or from an ocean, that's for sure, there's no problem. Even when a person goes into someone's field and he catches an animal, so he's really not allowed to go into the person's field, but lepel, if he went in there and he caught the animal, he was kaina, because lepel, the bala soda wasn't kaina because it was a chotzer shein mishtameres. Masha'enkin, if he goes into a bibber, which belongs to somebody, and even though it's lepel, it's not in a way that's mamish trapped, it's very free, and lepel, you still have to catch it, but lepel, since it finds itself in a rishus that has an owner, and that rishus is a chotzer mishtameres, the animal can't run away from there, so therefore it belongs to the owner of that bibber, and therefore when you go ahead and take it, it's a gazl. Halacha gimel. That's if you go actually to bibber shel abaylim. Masha'enken alikeach dogim mitech mitzudasi shel chaverik kshu b'tech hayam. There's a person has a net that he put a net to catch fish in the yam, and it already came into the net, and b'lepel it's still b'tech hayam. A person set up a trap for an animal, and it's and he caught a chaya, but it's in the midbar, and that mitzud is not really a keli. It's not really a keli that's koina. In other words, it trapped the animal, but on the other end, the keli is not a chotzer. So the din is hareza awesome midivrei seifrim. So it's awesome midivrei seifrim to go ahead and take that animal which was trapped by someone else's trap. Whereas the other person wasn't koined because lepel, that trap doesn't have a din of a keli, or that net doesn't have a din of a keli. But on the other end, since lepel was already caught by that other person's net, so therefore midrabanan you're not allowed to take it. Now v'imhoya mitzuda keli v'lokach mitecha mitzuda. If this trap was actually a keli, in other words, it wasn't just a trap, it was actually a keli. So then the owner of the trap actually owns the keli, because now the keli is a keli, it's a chatzar mishtameres. because the animal's trapped in there. So Memela is Ariza Gazlan, so therefore he has a din of a Gazlan. So Bekitzer, if you take something of biver that belongs to a person, so it's a Gazlan, even though it's Mechusar Tzeda. You take something out of someone's trap, so if that trap is not a keli, so it says Isum D'Rabbanan. If the trap is a keli and the trap is lying in a midbar or wherever, in a place that you could be koine in your keli, so Memela, that person is considered a Gazlan. Now Hapoir is halacha dalet. Hapoir is mitzuda b'stei chaveri. Someone sets up a trap in someone else's field. V'sod b'chayoyev is afal pi she'ein lo yushus lasis dover zeh kona. So even though he didn't have permission to do this, nevertheless he's koina. Now the chiddush over here is that says if the trap is not a keli, so obviously it means he's only keli midrabanan. Just like you're not allowed to take something out of someone's trap that's in the midbar when it's not a keli. So al derazeh, you're not allowed to take something out of someone's trap which is in someone else's field, which obviously would also be only midrabanan. Now, what happens if the trap is actually a keli? So even if it's actually a keli, it would only be a drabanan, because lepel, a person's keli can't be koine in someone else's field. We learned even b'negei the meicher and the koine, if someone's selling something and you can't go ahead and acquire something in the field of the meicher unless there's special permission of the meicher to the lekeach to buy to use his field to make an acquisition, or to put a keli into his field to make an acquisition. So if I put my mitzuda into someone else's field, so then be'etzem l'chura I'm not kaina. L'chura is not kaina. The chiddush over here is that there's a chiddush that it's kaina midrabanan. That's like. It's certainly not koine midiraisa. So nochamal, aperes mitzuda b'stei chaveri v'tzod b'chayev. So if the mitzuda is not a keli, for sure it's only a keli midrabanan. If the mitzuda is a keli, l'chura, the pashtus would be that it's not koine at all. I mean, l'chura, it shouldn't be koine at all, because lepel it's b'stei chaveri, and that would work also for the mitzuda that's not a keli. But nevertheless, over is a chiddush that since you put a mitzuda there, so even though normally a keli is not koine, but over here you person was Masamas, he worked on putting a Matsuda there, so therefore Chazal said that he's Koine, but again, he's only Koine Midrabanan. Now, if the Balasada was standing in the field, that my field should be Koine this animal for me, is Koine Balasada, mainly Balamasuda Klum. Because Lepel, when a person owns a field and he's Oimed B'tzat Sodeyu, and he says Zoxuli Sodi, so then he's Koine. Now, the question is, are we talking about, in other words, there's a din that in order for it to be able to work, when a person says Zochseli Sodi, is only when it's not a tzvi, which is Rotz Kedarke. Because if it's a tzvi that's a Rotz Kedarke, so it's not, so even Oimed B'tzat Sodeu is not going to work. So the Churi here, the Rambam is not making really conditions. The Rambam is saying, so again, a person put a trap into someone else's field, and that person, so if the owner is not there, so that person is kaina, and as we said, he's kaina midrabanan. If that person is there and he says zochsel isadi, he's kaina. When is he kaina? So you could learn Pashat, he was kaina as soon as the animal was in the field. He said zochsel isadi. So Memela, the animal is already his. So Memela, once it's his, so obviously it can be nikna by this person that put the trap there. But some learn that it's talking about the with even in an animal that he can't really be koine with the zochsel isadi because the animal is rotz kedarke. So when is he koine? He's koine when the animal goes into the trap. So when the animal goes into the trap and the balasada is over there and he's saying zochsel isadi, so in Mela, he's like employing the trap of this person that really doesn't have a right to put the trap there, but it's only midrabanan that we say that it belongs to him. But if while it was going into the trap he said zochsel isadi, so then it belongs to the Baal Hasada. Halacha hey, dogim shekafzu l'teich hasvina is kona Baal Hasvina. Why? Shezu kechatzer mishtameres, because a svina is considered a chatzer mishtameres. I lechur it's a chatzer maleches, and we have a rule that a chatzer maleches is not kena. So now he says, no, ve'ina chatzer maleches. It's not considered a chatzer maleches. Shahamayim hein shemilichenesa. It's not really going on its own. The water is moving it. Ve'ina hileches machmas atzma. So the Lashon Ram over here is ve'ina hileches machmas atzma, which means that it's being moved by someone else. The Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch, when the Alter Rebbe quotes this halacha, legabi a different thing, legabi Hilchos Birchas Hamazon, so the Alter Rebbe writes that really the ship finds itself on the water and the water is moving. In other words, it's not that the ship is moving because of the water. The water under the ship is moving, and the ship is not moving. It's like a difference. In other words, when we say a ship is not a chotzer hamalachas, is the pshat is because the chotzer is not moving, because it's not moving mitzad atzma, the water is causing it to move, or the reason why it's not a chotzer hamalachas is because it's actually not moving. It's only the water under it is moving, and the ship is moving memela. Lumashayla would be a car. A car definitely is moving, but it's not moving mitzad atzma. It's moving mitzad another thing. Something is pushing the car, or whatever. Something in such a situation where something is pushing something, so it's definitely moving. Or no, something is on top of something, and then you say it's not moving. The thing under it is moving. That would be the shayla. What's the pshat that a chotzer is a chotzer she'enim malachas? Halacha vov. So we spoke about that. There's hefker. There's hefker. Pashtus means someone was mafker something, as we'll learn behemshach. And then there's a musig of midbaris and the haris and the cholim, where those things you could be zeicha from, and we're talking about over here being zeicha, things that of oifis and dogim and chayis, which you could be zeicha, and the question is when you're zeicha. In other words, when are you zeicha? Are you actually zeicha? When in other words, when it goes into your trap, it's your zeicha because lepel your trap is a din of a keli. Or maybe when the trap doesn't have a din of a keli, only zeichem b'drabon, and we learned these dinim. Now we're talking about another heichatimtz of something that's hefker. Halacha vov. Halacha vov. Ger shemes v'leihelid Yisrael achash nizgar. A ger died, and he didn't have any children. Notice he didn't have any children. That's heirasi v'leidosi b'kedusha. Whereas if he has a child, for example, a ger has a child which was taka leidosi b'kedusha. In other words, there was a woman that became uberes from this ger while he was a goy, and now this woman was nizgayer, and now he has a child which is a yid. But Lepel, he doesn't have a din of his child, because Lepel, since she was Hirasa, was Shalei B'Gdusha, and now she became a yid, so nu Metzias. So nu Metzias has no yachas to the goy that was moiled her. So Memela, so in order for a ger to have a child that has a din of a child, it has to be he has a child that was Hirasi V'Lidasa B'Gdusha. Now, if he dies and he doesn't have such a child, so Memela, basically, he has no Yarshim. So everything that he owns becomes Hefker. Ger Shemes, V'lehelid Yisrael Achash Nizgar, he had no children after he was Nizgar, is Ein Le Yarshim. Ela Kol HaKedim V'hirzi B'Nechosav Zocha. So everything that he owns becomes Hefker. And Ve'ein Bal HaMetzer Yochel Esalki B'Dom. Now, normally the din is, when a person sells a piece of karka, and there's a next door neighbor, and that person can have a right that this piece of karka should be sold to him. And even if someone else went ahead and bought it, he could go to him and say, no, that I had the first right to buy it, and therefore I'll pay you whatever you paid for it, but give me the karka. So over here, even this ger died, and someone else went ahead and was zeicha in his karka, so the next door neighbor can come along and say, listen, you were zeicha in a karka that really I should have the right to have, because I'm the next door neighbor. That whole din is only when you sell. When you sell a piece of karka, you have to sell it to the next door neighbor. But if you, let's say, give it as a present, so you can't say you have to give it away a present to the next door neighbor. Lepeli gave it a present to whoever it is. Aldera's over here. Since the ger, that you were zeicha from the ger, so it's as if you got it as a present from the ger. That's what the Ram is saying. As if you got it as a present from the ger. There was no sale, so memela, so the bar metzger has no taina. That's what he's saying. The Baal Metzger can go ahead and tell this person that was zeicher in the Nichsi Ager, which there was a next door neighbor, he can go ahead and say, here's money, and I'll take the karka. El Shizuk Matana, because it has a din like Matana. Just like by a Matana, you can't say it. So over here, it's even more than that. L'churi, he was zeichem and a hefker. It's even more than a Matana. So B'meila, so therefore, the Bar Metzger has no time. Halacha Zayin. Shtei sodis b'nichsei ager. There were two fields. The ger owned two fields. Umeitzer echad b'neim. There was a border clearly delineated between the two fields. Now hirzik ba'achas man liknoisa. He went ahead and was machzik in one of those fields in order this person. The ger died, and now anyone that wants could go ahead and be zoicha from the ger's nechasim. So someone went ahead and made a chazaka on this field to be kohen of the field. Is kana. He was kohen of the field because he made a chazaka in the field. He's kohen. Now hirzik bo liknus oisa ve'eskaverta. When he made the chazaka, he had intent of being kohen aside this field and side the neighboring field, which was divided by a border. So the din is hirzik bo kana because he'll pay. He made a ma'asakin in the field. Avol chaverta lekana, but he was not kohen of the chaverta. And as we said before, that even though when you sell a field and you have 10 fields, you make a chazak on one of them, you koine all the fields, but that's only when there's a mechira and al there's a matana. Masha'inkin, when you're being zeichem in a hefker, so there's no das acheres makna, so a chazak in one field can't work for the other field. Now hirzigbo, however, and hirzigbo, so memeli when you're koine, you have intent to be koine both fields, you only koine the field you made the chazak in, not the other field. Now hirzigbo kedei liknus is chaverta, you made a chazak in one field with the intent of being koine the second field, but not the field you made the chazak in, is lekona achas mem. So you're not koine either of them. Chaverta mipnei shel hirzigbo, because you didn't actually make a chazak there. Ve'esem mipnei shel hirzigbo kedei liknus, you had no intent of being koine. You made a chazak in field number 1 in order to be koine field number 2. So you're not koine field number 2 because you didn't make a chazak in field number 2, and you weren't koine field number 1 because you had no intent of being koine field number 1. Now here's the book. Now your intent was to be koine inside the field you made the chazak in, inside the next neighboring field, and also the border. So basically, you want to like make it into one package. Or you are magzik in the metzer in the border, and your intent is to be koine both. Is here is a suffix. It's a suffix whether this kinyan works. Now, if someone was magzik in either, if a person, let's say, made a kinyan in one field, and then he had intention of having the kinyan side in the border and side the neighboring field, or he made a kinyan on the border and he had an intention for both fields, and the other person came and he made a kinyan either in the second field and in the border, or he made a kinyan on both fields because he was only kain in the border. Kedei leknesa is zocha achron. The second one is kaina. But since the first one was, there's a suffix whether he was kaina, and as he made a ma'aser kinyan, which is a suffix that he was kaina, and over here the other person made a ma'aser kinyan, which is a vadia ma'aser kinyan. So the Maggid Mishnah says that here we apply the principle of ein suffix meitzim devadei, which is a chiddush to kazach. And normally you say ein suffix meitzim devadei. In other words, the person, there was a matzav of vadei, and here there was a matzav of suffix that's changing the matzav of vadei. Over here, l'chura, this person made a ma'aser kinyan, and there was a suffix whether this ma'aser kinyan was a ma'aser kinyan. Later tzad that it was a ma'aser kinyan, so the second one's person is not a ma'aser kinyan. L'chura, the second kinyan is not a ma'aser kinyan because it was a ma'aser kinyan that there was already a kinyan on, so maybe he had the right to make a ma'aser kinyan. So it's not really a mamash avadai. It's not a clear vadai. L'chura, it's a vadai. It's a vadi ma'aser kinyan, but it's not a vadi ma'aser kinyan that works because lepei later tzad that the first ma'aser kinyan worked. So l'chura, the second ma'aser kinyan is not a ma'aser kinyan that could work. Nevertheless, the Maggid Mishnah says that over here we employ the principle of ein suffix meitzim devadei, it's a chidush, and we say that since this person made a suffix ma'aser kinyan and the other ones made a vadi ma'aser kinyan, even though the vadi ma'aser kinyan came afterwards, so nevertheless we give it to the person that made the vadi ma'aser kinyan, which is the second kinyan. Halacha ches v'chein shnei batim zel lifnim mizeh. You have two rooms, one inside the other room. You have one room leading to another room, which is more inside. Shehirzik be'echad mem, you made a chazak in one of those rooms, liknoise, and also v'liknoise is hasheni. So then it's the same thing. Just like from one field, you can't make a chazak on one field to become another field, so you can't make a chazak on one room to become another room. Now hirzik be'echad mem k'dei liknoise hasheni. You made a chazak on one room, and your intent was not to be kaina the room you made the chazak on, but to be kaina the other room. Is avzeh shehirzik be'liknoise. So you weren't kaina either room. Halacha tes. Hamarzik b'shtar menichsi ager k'dei liknoise akarka aksuva be'isa shtar. A ger bought a piece of karka, and he had a star saying that this karka is his. Now this ger died, so now a person goes ahead, instead of making a chazak on the karka, he goes ahead and makes a chazak on the star, which says that the karka belongs to the ger. So the din is that's nothing. Likana ella star belvad. The kinyan on the star is not koina. The star is good when you're being makna the star. The makna the karka. So the owner of is giving the star. Masha'inkin, this person wants to be zeichem and a hefker. Whereas this karka now became hefker, and now the star really is meaningless. It's a hefker karka. So memela is likona ella star belvad lotzer al pitzluchus ekiyetzabe. You could use the star, whatever, as a bottle cap, but lepeil it's not going to be used anything in order for the karka to be yours. Halacha yud. Soda hamitzuyenes b'mitzorah you have a sada which clearly marked. The boundaries of the sada is marked. Is kivin shehikish bo makish echad. When a person bangs one bang into the sada, and as he does a ma'aseh chazaka of working into the sada, he's starting to plow the field. So the din is kones kulas. He's kind of the entire field, because the entire field has a din of one field. However, v'im eina mitzuyenes b'mitzareh. In other words, you have a large field, and it's not mitzuyenes b'mitzareh. There's no clear boundaries, and you know the boundaries. You know it's a known boundary. You know the field extends to a certain place, or where someone else's field begins. But it's not clearly mitzuyenes b'mitzareh. So the din is koine mimenu be'isa makush. When a person bangs this field and starts making a chazak in the field, he's not koine the entire field, but rather kedei sheyeh lechatzemed b'shas charisha v'yachzer. So in other words, a tzemed means a pair of oxen that go ahead and they plow together. That's the seder, that you pair up a pair of oxen and they plow together. So the amount that they would normally go with one going to plow and then come back, so which means they make one row of plowing and then they come back and they plow another row. So that amount of area is what you're koine with this makush, and that amount of area you're koine in all directions. Because you're koine in all four directions. You're koine with this makush the amount of area that the pair of oxen would go ahead and plow. Hametzer v'achotzov shemetachme beitchumen mafsikim menichsi ager, which means, let's say you have a large field, it all belongs to the ger, but on the other hand, in that field you have various different markers that normally divide one field in another. And they're all really his field. But let's say if you have a ditch, which are metzer, which is like a type of a ditch, which you have between two fields, which are used as markers between different fields. And al der is a chotzev. Chotzev is a type of something that grows. It's a type of grass that grows and grows very straight. And therefore that's also used as a marker between one field and another field. Now in reality, all of the fields around are also his. But lepel, within his field, there are markers, either a metzer and a chotzev. So the din is hametzer v'achotzev shemetachim b'tchumen. They are mafsikin b'nichsi ager. They are considered a hefsik b'nichsi ager. So if you have a nichsi ager, which is a large area, and in that large area there are small areas which are divided by these meitzer and chotzev, so therefore when a person makes a ma'aseh kinyan in one place, so he's not koine the other place. In other words, the adjacent area which is divided between this area, even though they both belong to the ger, is considered separate, and therefore you have to make a separate kinyan. Like we said before, that if you have two fields next to each other and there's a meitzer in between them, so even though they both belong to the ger, but lapel, they're considered separate, and therefore you have to make a separate kinyan on this field, and you have to make a separate kinyan on this field. Now, v'chol ha'machzik b'soda, likone el adam meitzer eidachotzev. That's this din. That they're considered mafsikim nichsi ager, and therefore anyone that makes a chazak on the soda, he only is koine until either the meitzer, which is the area which like the border, something that's normally used as a border, even though it wasn't really a border between two fields of his, because it was all his field, or the chotzev, which is also sometimes used as a border of a field. Now, kol mafsik lepeya, anything that's considered a hefsik lepeya. Now, the din is that you have to be mafresh peya from your field. When you cut a field, you have to leave off peya. Now, what happens if you have a field which is divided by different things? So different things cause that if you have two fields, you can't leave peya from one field for the other field. You have to leave from each field peya. Now, what's considered two fields? So there's certain dinim that if you have an amos hamayim in between the field or different areas which are separated, that's considered two separate fields, and therefore you have to be mafresh peya from each field. You can't be mafresh from one field for the other. So al derech zeh, anything that's considered a separation which would cause you to have to be mafresh peya from each side, so al derech zeh would be considered a separation that a kinyan on one side won't be koine on the other side. That's his din. Kol mafsik lepeya, anything that's considered a separation for peya, is also mafsik b'nichsi ager. That's considered a hefsik b'nichsi ager. Ketzad hoyisham nachal, if there was a stream, a yamas hamayim ukiesbem, or a channel of water, is leikone elad nachal. So you make a ma'aseh kinyan, and the ger really owned an area which is on this side of the nachal, and there is on this side of the nachal, on this side of the amos hamayim, the other side of the amos hamayim. The finezring leikone. And V'chola mafsik b'rshus Shabbos, and also something which is considered a hefsek b'rshus Shabbos, is mafsik b'nichsi ager. That's also considered a hefsek again. Shahaya ben shtei asodas rishus hayochad karmelis. In other words, there was two fields, and in between the two fields, there was an area that was a rishus hayochad. It was a separate area which was the rishus hayochad, or it was a karmelis. Afilo b'neim rishus shechilekes legitten. Even if between the two fields there was an area which was considered chilekes legitten. By negeh gitten, the din is that when a person throws a get to a woman, so if it's her rishus, so she becomes mugureshes. Now, if he wants to be makna to her a rishus b'rishusei, so she could also become mugureshes. Now, what happens if in that area where he's being makna, there's an area which is gavei asara and rachav dalet al dalet? So legabe, so a person is not interested in being makna two areas. He's only interested in being makna one area. So memela, if it falls over there in that other area, so she's not megureshes. So it's considered a separate rishus legabe gitten. That's what he's saying. Afil lahoyi b'neim rishus shechelekes legitten, between this side of the field and the other side of the field, there was an area which would be considered a separate rishus as far as gitten is concerned. So therefore, that's also a separation between the two fields, and therefore, so you're not koina the other side of this separation when you make a kinyan on one side, you're not koina on the other side. Now this din that would between the two sadas, there's an area that's a karmelis, but the sadas bepashtas are also a karmelis. It means to say there's an area that's a din karmelis even besides the fact that it's a din sadis. In other words, it's an area that would be divided by, let's say, a mechitza, which is gavei gimel tvachim. So an area which is surrounded by a mechitza gimel tvachim has a din of a karmelis. That's what it means. It means there's two sadis, and in between the two sadis, there's an area which that area is mitzad it atzma would be a karmelis. So therefore, that would be considered a hefsek between the two sadis, and therefore, when you make a kinyan on one side, you're not kohen on the other side. Halacha yud beis. Kol davar hamafsik l'tumah, an area which is considered separately as far as tumah is concerned, is also mafsik b'nichsi hager, is considered separate as far as nichsi hager is concerned. Ketzad, ken shenichnas adam lebika zu, person enters a bika, an area where there's a lot of fields, and v'tumah bebika b'tzid acheres, and in this bika where there's many fields, we know that on one side of the bika, b'tzid acheres, over there's tumah. And lepeil, it's not so clear in the Rambam, l'churei pshat is ve'enu yidea im higia l'mekei matuma im lav. And there's an area where over there it's not clear whether he was higia l'makom matuma. No, there's an area in the bika where over there bepashtus he didn't get to the tumah. That's clear, he didn't get to the tumah. Then there's another area in the bika where over there it's not clear whether he reached the makom matuma im lav. Is kol makom shemachzik nesel l'tumah, any place where over there he goes into the suffix, maybe his stomach, is harei k'mokamacher mechulik b'fnei atzmi. Is the nikud of the din is that if you have a bika, and part of the bika is a place where it's considered a place where it's a suffix, maybe that's where the tum is. And there's the other part of the bika, where over there it's for sure not tumah, so it's considered like a separate area. So the part of the area, so if a person's going to make a maisakinyan, a chazaka in the area where there's for sure no tumah, and he's not going to be koina that other area which goes into the suffix that maybe there is tumah. Now that's considered, since it's a davar hamafsik l'tumah, so therefore it's considered two separate areas, and therefore would be making a kinyan on one side, you're not koina on the other side. Halacha yud gimel. Bika gdoila sheyesh ba sadis rabis, and v'kulam shel ger echad, they all belong to one ger, and there was nothing interrupting. It was one large area that was all shel ger echad. Now someone comes, and he makes a kinyan on part of the bika, liknis is kula. So over here, kol nikra al shem esi ager kein esi. Anything that's considered part of the ger's property, he's koina. Now even though before we learned that if you go into a large field, so you're only koina kedei that the oxen would be able to go and come back. So it's l'chura stira to this halacha. This halacha is saying you're koina the entire field. So the Mefarshim explain that over here we're talking about that since the whole place is called Hashem Hager, over there it wasn't so clearly that it was called Hashem Hager. Lepeil, he owned the whole area, and Lepeil, there was nothing interrupting one place and the other. So we say, how much are you koina? There was no Meitzer to clearly mark where is his. Shenken over here, Weiss is talking about something that's Nikra al Shem Eisei Hager. It's an area which the whole area is called Shem Eisei Hager. And he had Kavara to be Koinet, so B'Chiyah Gavna, he's Taka Koinet the whole thing. That's what it says in the Sma. Halacha Yudalet. Goy Shemocher Metalton Yisrael, Eikon Metalton Yisrael, when a guy sells Metalton or buys Metalton Yisrael, so the din is Koinet b'Mashicha, Umakna b'Mashicha Ibedom. So even though it sounds like over here that he's Koinet only b'Mashicha and he's Makna b'Mashicha Ibedom, but the Maggid Mishnah says Pshat and Be'emes, the Rambam says it clearly in other places, that Be'emes he's Sai Kain and Sai Makna, Sai b'Mashicha, Sai b'Medom. So it's Koinet b'Mashicha or Makna, and by both of them it's b'Mashicha Ibedom. So he could be Koine b'Mashicha or b'Damim, or he could be Makne b'Mashicha or b'Damim. And that's been again Metaltal. Aval HaKarka, but as far as Karka is concerned, is Eine Koine Esim Yisrael Ela B'Shtar. In order for a Goy to be Koine Karka from a Yid, is only if he has a Shtar. That's number one. And he also, Shtar alone is not enough, he has to give money. Shtar is not enough, but it has to be a Shtar. And Ve'ene Makne Esim Yisrael Ela B'Shtar. And a goy also can't be makna to a Yisrael. In other words, Yisrael is not going to be kind from the goy unless he gets a shtar. The goy is not going to be kind from the Yid unless he gets a shtar. He gets a shtar only if he gets a shtar, and also if he gave money. The Ram doesn't mention that, but it also means he gave money. He has to get a shtar and give money. And ein makna esel Yisrael ela b'shtar. Why? Shein daiti semechas ela la shtar. A Yid. This is really going. The reason why a goy is not koina only with a shtar, because the Chacham made a takana that we don't want a goy to force a yid to, and the goy will make a chazaka to force a yid, and he'll give the yid money and take the karka from him. So therefore, the Chacham instituted that in order for a goy to own a karka, to get a karka that belonged to a yid, there has to be that the yid wrote him a shtar, which will be harder for the goy to get the yid to write him a shtar. So therefore, they instituted that the goy doesn't acquire the karka that belonged to a yid unless he has a shtar from the yid. There has a shtar from the yid, and also that he gave the money for the shtar. For the if he got a shtar without getting money, this is also not a king. But I'll call upon karka in a kaina isim Yisrael el b'shtar, and that's din number one. And then there's another din that the yid is not kaina from the goy unless the yid got a shtar. And for that, that's already another reason, because a Yid doesn't have really Gemiras Das to be kind. He doesn't really feel confident on the Kinyan unless he was gotten a shtar. Ve'eni makna esel Yisrael el b'shtar, she'in daiti semechas el shtar. The Yid is not going to feel a smichas das that he has the karka unless he got a shtar. Lefichach, Yisrael shelokach sodom and agoy. A Yid bought karka from a goy, and v'nosan adomim, and he gave the money. So now the goy is willing to give up the karka. Now, before the Yid actually made a chazaka in this karka, bo Yisrael acher v'hirzik bo, kederach shemachzikim nichsi ager, as if he made a kinyan in it, as if he's being koina and hefker. So the din is zocha achrein, so that second person is koina. But lepeil, since the Yid already paid for this karka, so memela the money that he paid for the karka is like a lien. Whereas unless he gets the karka, the money is returned to him, has to be returned to him. So therefore, v'noisen l'rishnas adomim, this second person that made a ma'aser kinyan on the karka has to give money to the first person that paid for the karka to the goy. Nachamal, a Yid went ahead, he wants to buy a piece of karka from a goy, so he went ahead and paid money to the goy. And lepel, the Yid went ahead and he didn't make a chazaka yet, so another Yid comes along and he makes a chazaka on this karka. So the din is that since this karka, the Yid paid for it, so by the Yid paying for it, the goy relinquished his rights to it. He's ready to be maknet to this Yisrael. He's ready to be maknet to Yisrael. But lepeil, the Yisrael wasn't kainet with the fact that he paid money because he doesn't have a smichas das and he's waiting for a shtar. So lepeil, it's not really his. So on one hand, the goy relinquished his rights to it, and on the other hand, the Yisrael doesn't really own it. Now comes along a second person, and he makes a ma'aser chazak in it. So he's making a ma'aser chazak on a piece of karka, which the goy, so to speak, gave up his rights to it. But on the other hand, the Yid wasn't koinit yet. So Mele, he's koinit. But on the other hand, since the Yid already paid the goy, And the deal is kilo that he paid the guy owes him the money back unless he gets the money from the karka. So Mela, he has a lien on the karka for this money that he gave to the guy. So Mela, if this second yid wants to own the karka, there's a lien on this karka. The lien on this karka is from the money that the yid gave to the guy. So unless he pays back this yid for that money that he gave to the guy, he can't keep the karka. That's the seichel that's going on. Let's go again. Lefichach Yisrael shelakach sadim and a guy. A yid bought a sadim from a guy. V'nosan nadam, he paid for it. But before he made a Maisa Kinyan, boy Yisrael Acher, another Yid came, and he made a Maisa Kinyan, a Chazaka, Keder Shemachzikim Nichse Ager. So the din is Zocha Achrin, so the second one is Koina, and V'noisen L'rishon is Adam, but he has to pay the first person that gave the money to the guy, he has to pay him back. Mipnei, Shahagoy Me'ei Shalokach Hadam, as soon as he gets the money, Silik Rishusei, he gave up, he relinquished his ownership. The Yid doesn't really feel comfortable that the karka is his until he gets the star. So he was waiting for the star. Only then is the sale finalized. So at this point in time, between giving the money and getting the star, is the chasem elu kenichsei midbar shekol hamazik b'emzach. But on the other hand, the Yid that's being mazik has to go ahead and pay the Yid the money that he paid the guy. Halacha tezva. B'medvarim amurim, this again, the Rambam said before, b'mokim she'ein mishpat yadu ala melech. All these din only apply when there's no clear din that the melech has. Aval in din oisi ha-melech mishpatei, shel yiske bekarke lemisha kesa b'shtar, ihanesen domo kiyesa b'dvarim elu. In other words, this din that we just learned, that you could be koine with chazaka, you'll be koine the karka with chazaka after the goy already received the money, before the original yid, the first yid that gave the money, received the star. So the goy, if there's a halach of the melech has a din. No, shaliska bekarka lemishakaisa b'shtar. Only someone that writes a star, or the person that gave the money, and this second person could not go ahead and be koine. There's a clear halacha in Hilchis HaMelech against this din that we just learned in Halacha Yudalet, where the second person was Zecha. So then it's Eisen Kavi Mishpad HaMelech, Shekol Dini HaMelech B'mom, Al Piyam Donim. So if there's a clear din in the Melech which contradicts this halacha, which doesn't permit this second person to make a Maisa Kinyan in the Karka, so then we don't go with this halacha, because this halacha is only when there's no din HaMelech against it.